It's HBR1. I'm Dave Lawrence, and we're about to have a special guest on the program. And let's take a listen to his new song. This is Reinventing the Future from Operation Mindcrime, The Key. Joining us today, Geoff Tate. To many, a vocalist and songwriter, particularly of concept albums, also a vintner, winery in the Pacific Northwest, avid outdoor enthusiast, sometimes hiking across countries, also a philanthropist who's used his fame to help those in need, voice of Queensryche for decades, for many fans inseparable from that Seattle band's sound. He's now a solo artist with his latest release, Operation Mindcrime, The Key, an unusual new conceptual multi-album story. And we welcome Geoff Tate back to HBR and All Things Considered to talk about it. Now, thanks a lot, Geoff.
Great to be back on, Dave.
It's nice to hear your voice. And is it a project or a band? What should I think of it as?
Well, I think it'd probably better described as a project, an open-ended project where like-minded people get together and create music together.
It started with a hike through northern Spain that it provided the inspiration for the storyline?
Yeah, exactly it. I don't know if you've ever hiked a lot, but it's 500 miles across northern Spain, and it's a long ways to go, so you can get kind of overwhelmed with the enormity of the journey unless you kind of break it down and just think of one foot in front of the other. There's a lot of time to think, and came up with this storyline, and I thought that it would fit kind of a large-scale conceptual project, which I've been wanting to do for a while. I like the idea of telling one long story over 3 records. That sounded kind of interesting to me.
And the record has a feel that's not unlike Operation Mindcrime, which was a really classic part of your life, late 80s Queensryche album, concept record for folks who are not as familiar, much like The Key is. It's not the kind of thing, well, here's the encapsulated version. It doesn't really work like that with something along those lines. But for folks who are tuning in to a public radio afternoon show and curious about it.
Well, we are living in really interesting times right now with sweeping social changes happening. The telecommunications that we have now allow us to witness and to influence changing public opinion in a grand worldwide scale. A story is happening on the other side of the world. You're tuned into it, and people's commentary really does help shape public opinion. So bearing that in mind, the story is, I don't know if you're a parent.
No.
As a parent, we begin really early teaching our children or programming them as to what reality is. And by that I mean we define the sky. This is grass. This is a tree. This is a dog, a cat, a table, a chair, an automobile. And those definitions shape our individual view of what reality is. And so in my story, there's 4 individuals that come together and they develop a technology that allows people to see a different reality. They begin seeing the enormity of this invention, that it can radically change the world. And because of that awareness, there comes a fracture. Some of the group want to develop this program into a marketable apparatus that they can make a lot of money from. Others in the group have a more altruistic view, and they want to give it to the world. So what the first album, The Key, does is it introduces a little bit about the technology, introduces us to the 4 main characters of the story, and also introduces us to the conflict that arises.
And after having to talk about it as many times as you have, you've got that honed to such a great...
Do I?
Really.
I've been working on that.
And I can tell. As you're pointing out with The Key, attitude and the way you look at everything can immensely change your journey or your voyage.
Yeah, that's a really neat, interesting analogy. It is a bit like, you ever heard that simple statement, if you want to change the world, you got to change yourself. It's kind of like that. I think the mistake that we all make is we begin to assume that everyone sees things just like we do.
Right.
And I think that's a huge mistake. I think it actually takes a conscious effort to change that practice in order to see things in a different way.
One of the interesting ways you're approaching it, getting to the 4-character part of it, you end up with other voices. You're allowing these characters to, on different songs, step up to the plate and be the lead.
Yeah, playing the different characters of the story, yeah.
It's like you're hearing a soundtrack to a stage show of some kind.
Well, I kind of think cinematically when I write. I think of the album as a film, and each song is a scene in the film. It does offer you, as a writer, a larger palette, and it also gives you the ability to assign a character a different voice and its own sound.
You're like a director. I totally get the analogy to the movie, dialing yourself back to when you were young. I don't know when they first came into your life, but the concept albums that as a fan, inform this passion that you have for doing the same thing?
Yeah, that's one of the kinds of musical things that really struck me as a young person. The Beatles, of course, Sgt. Pepper's was one of the first concept records I ever heard. Later, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. Yes, It's Close to the Edge, Tales of Topographic Oceans, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway from Genesis. That's where I kind of draw inspiration from. I think subconsciously, as a writer, you carry all those musical influences with you. You really hang on to your original musical inspirations, I find.
When you were young, when you made the discovery that you could sing, your mom's there, somebody who just says, Jeff, you got this canon, I don't think you know what you got going on, and just the development of that, if you can.
Honestly, there really wasn't a significant moment like that. It was more, I had been studying to be a musician for many, many years, starting when I was 9 years old. I was constantly in bands, as in school orchestra, school band, jazz bands, and started working with bands out of school.
Being into music at 9, what was the record? What was the moment?
It was a song by Jefferson Airplane on the radio.
What song?
I told my mom. It was Somebody to Love. And I told my mom, I want to do that. How do I do that? And she says, well, that takes being a musician. And to be a musician, you have to study music and you have to play an instrument. So what do you want to play? And I said, well, what's that sound of that right there? What is that? She said, that's an electric guitar. I said, that's what I want to do. And she said, well, that takes you being a certain age. So in order to play a guitar, you have to take a year of piano lessons. So I took a year of piano lessons, and I never went to the guitar because I just totally got off on the piano. That kind of started me.
At 9 is when you discovered Somebody to Love.
Yep.
Just a couple months ago, Jack Cassidy and Ewan McCalkinen, we had him right in the studio. You know who that is, I'm assuming. You know who that is.
Yeah.
It's just so amazing how close all the roads circle.
Oh, yeah, it is. Well, that's, music is a kind of an evolutionary animal. As musicians, we all are inspired by each other, and we take little bits and pieces from all those, inspirations, and we add them to what we do, and what we do inspires somebody else, and it's just a big, long story. I was always affected by music emotionally. First and foremost, that's what does it for me. And then, being a songwriter and a player, you start picking it apart and figuring out the mechanics of, well, how do they make that sound like that, or what's happening within the chord to make it ring like that, or how's that melody working with that chord progression? You start tearing it apart and figuring out the mechanics of it. But I never was really influenced by a specific singer or guitar player. I just liked a lot of people. I liked what they did, or I looked at the song first. Well, how does the song make me feel? And some singers and some players have the ability to really put across a really beautiful emotion, the delivery of it. Like you look at John Lennon, he wasn't like a really what I would call a super expressive singer, but he wrote really pretty melodies that stick in your head. Somebody like Tom Jones, what a dynamic big voice he sings with. Halford, again, he's an amazing, powerful singer. Somebody like Sade, very moving singer in a very strange way, kind of a detached coldness to what she does, but it has this amazing emotion to it that's like, struggling to erupt, but never does.
Those tunes are very nostalgic when you hear the Sade songs. It's like transportive to somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I look for in music, and I guess what I try to emulate when I'm writing as well.
The key is the record. Reinventing the Future is the single. It's Geoff Tate. You know him from Queensryche. You know him as just this great voice, and hopefully you know him for having a fun interview on the show here.
That was great. Really relaxed style, great questions, introspective stuff. And you never asked me about my hair, which is really a pleasure. You're like one of the best, Dave. Thank you.
You're welcome, and you be safe, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Take care, Dave. Thank you. Hi, this is Geoff Tate, and you're listening to Hawaii Public Radio, All Things Considered, with my good friend Dave Lawrence.